Okay, so that introduction. Today I'm going to be talking to John Etheridge. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
Now, you sort of preempted my first question, really, with your musical intro. Which is, my first question is, what do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? What do I do? Yes, one is defined by what one does, and which, of course, now in the era of COVID is rather, what would we call it, thin ice, really. Basically, I'm a performing guitarist. I'm a guitar player who sees his main activity as playing live on stage to audiences. So I will this year, on the anniversary of the first lockdown, I've done 5 gigs this year. When a normal year I do about 120. So it's a change. So that's what I am. I'm a guitar player.
Cool. And obviously, as we go through your story, we'll realise what sort of guitar player you are, because it's quite a story. Okay, so let's take you back to the beginning, John. So,
yeah,
how did you get started with music? Was it something that you can sort of go?
Well, my father was a musician. He wasn't a professional musician, but music and golf were his 2 major loves. Like a lot of people at that age, you know, his work was. He was a doctor, so his work was something he did, and it gave him a good living. But really, his love was jazz and golf. And I never took to the golf. But I took to the jazz, interestingly, because when I started playing guitar in 1960, you know, there was a lot of people I listened to who inspired me. Hank Marvin, for instance, was a major inspiration. But because of my dad, who played this jazz piano every night after work, he'd sit down and play The Sheik of Araby or I Surrender Dear or some boogie woogie. And he was very good. He played like Teddy Wilson.
Right.
And not you know, not quite as good,
no, but good enough.
Style and very good swinging with the tenths in the left hand.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
And that style. And wonderful, those tenths, because if you listen to Teddy Wilson or my dad, they're not actually stated half the time. You kind of feel them, you know. Anyway, so I was, you know, I wouldn't say I was enamored, but it was an influence in my life, you know, and so jazz was always there. And so my development as a guitar player was slightly different from most people of my age and era, because then I heard Django Reinhardt, who was also quite arcane at the time. I mean, the records weren't very available. And I just had a bit of luck and heard some Django Reinhardt records out of luck, really, because one of the parents of my best friend at school, he was a guitarist, a bit like my dad was a pianist, and he played these Django Reinhardt records, and my dad was playing me Charlie Christian and saying, don't listen to Django Reinhardt, listen to Charlie Christian. And then, you know, this other parent was saying, no, Django Reinhardt's the man. So I got all these influences early on. And, you know, nowadays everybody goes, so what? Everybody's heard that stuff. But you didn't hear it. The thing was, in those days, you heard the mainstream music of the time, and everything else was hard to get hold of, which is why, you know, when Mick Jagger met Keith Richards on the bus and they were both holding blues albums, it's like, wow, where'd you get that from? Wow, where'd you get that from? It was the same with the Django thing.
Yeah.
We were Django for now. And we wanted, and me and my friend used to play Django tunes very badly. when we were about 14, 15. And so that was a major thing for me. And then later on.
See, I've always been interested in the way that obviously music in the 1960s developed in the UK, because obviously a lot of the bands and stuff came from places where they had access to people from the Merchant Navy, because obviously there's no way of getting the records unless they came by import, you know. And I was talking to
one of the. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was talking to Chaz Hodges about this, you know, Chaz and Dave, and it was the whole thing of, you know, there was somebody in their sort of row of houses or block of flats or wherever it was he was living, who was in the Navy, who used to bring in blues albums and stuff like that. And the other thing was that there was somebody who had a television, which was another rare commodity that you know, in the case of trying to find out when Lonnie Donegan was on the TV.
Yes.
And we sort of forget the rarity of that information.
Yes, I think it's very important if anybody's interested, and presumably if anybody's interested in the conversation, they're interested in what it was like in a historical sense. And of course, it's one of the reasons why port cities like Liverpool or New Orleans became one of the factors in their importance as cultural melting pots, because people were coming, sailors were coming in, people were bringing music in. You know, they say in New Orleans that Mexican bands were as important as anything else in influencing the arrival of what we call jazz. So, and Liverpool the same. So you're right, these strange influences. And actually, if you had a record, you know, if you were lucky enough to have, and I had one Django Reinhardt record, and then I got a Joe Pass record called For Django. And of course, you'd play these records to death, and you knew them backwards, and you'd absorb them into your DNA almost. So they were part of your life. Because now, I mean, I don't know if everybody's like this, I just flit around, you know. Before we started this interview, I was sort of flitting, you know, find a tune and then find it on YouTube and then listen to it a bit and then listen to another tune and various versions of it. And of course, it's a wonderful resource, but somehow, you know, in those days, you know, this is all a bit, you know, young people wouldn't believe it. Cardboard box, that will look.
Yeah, that's right, middle of the road.
Middle of the road with record. We didn't have a record player. We had to imagine what Louis Armstrong sounded like. We had to hear it. You know, it's very easy to get like that, but it was. And you know, follow up to that was the first band I had at my school was Shadows, playing the Shadows, and I got the job on lead guitar. And actually, the most talented musician was a guy who, for some reason, he had a Future Armor 3, red Future Armor 3. But he decided he wanted to play bass, and he had the most phenomenal ear. And we used to listen, the only chance we had was to listen to two-way family favorites.
Yeah.
And so we listened to two-way family favorites on a Saturday morning, and they might get a request for the latest Shadows song. Yeah. And that would be played, and this guy could hear it once and memorize all the parts.
Wow.
And to us, and he was a genius, really.
Yeah.
So you know, obviously I heard quite a lot of it, and my friend heard quite a lot of it, but he would get the whole thing, and we'd learn it from him. So that was another thing, you know, hearing things and working them out. And I'm sure that guitarists of my era, one of the reasons why they have their own styles, as it were, is because they tried to copy things, and because you couldn't hear it, you never really got it properly. So
exactly,
you put your own version of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've said this. This is something that's come up in the podcast a number of times, actually, about the fact that you never quite nailed it if you try to work it out.
Exactly.
And you'd have to do a little bit of guesswork, which then actually it was the only bit of that thing that you learned that was sort of yours, if you see what I mean.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this applies to all the guitarists of my age, say in my field, you know, Alan Holmes or John McLaughlin, Jim Mullen or Albert Lee or Richard Thompson or everybody developed. First of all, they kind of, you got your own technique because there was nobody to tell you what was the right way to play and the wrong way to play.
Yeah.
So, you know, you didn't know what fingers to use and you didn't really know what to do with the pick. So you worked out your own thing that worked for you. And I always think, you know, the difference between Frank Zappa and Dweezil Zappa in terms of guitar playing. When you see Frank Zappa playing, I mean, technically it's kind of all over the place, you know.
Yeah.
It's really the way he holds the pick and the fingering. It's all typical self-taught guy. And when you see Dweezil, it's absolutely immaculate. All the technique is perfect.
Yeah.
And because he's been schooled, so he, you know, he sounds like a real virtuoso. And because there was education and there was, and so, we had to make our own music. We really, there was nobody. I was at school. I was at boarding school, actually. I have to own up, you know. I was at boarding school, which was a disaster. And there was a classical guitar teacher they got in about 1963, 64. But I refused to go to him because for me, playing the guitar was a rebellion against the school. I wouldn't go. And I remember the headmaster came, wrote a report saying, oh, God, if he's going to play that guitar all the time, why doesn't he learn it properly?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was a rebellion for me. So everything I did was mine and self-taught. And of course, I've never had a lesson, but that's not particularly outstanding in my generation. I'm sure I wouldn't have thought Albert Lee's ever had a lesson, you know.
Yeah.
So we all... And of course, the problem is, I certainly feel that there are holes in my education, you know, quite bad holes that I've tried to catch up later. But the plus side is that you almost automatically developed a way of playing that was personal, at least personal. I'm not going to say, you know, unique or original, but personal. You easily got a personal way of playing. And now the issue now is that fantastic players, and you can get anything, literally, as you know. I don't have to tell people this, but it's all still amazing to me that if I want to work out how so-and-so played something, I can just look it up on YouTube and somebody will give me a lesson on exactly how this was played.
Yes.
And if I wanted to, I could learn it exactly like it was played. And this has always been considered a good learning tool. In a way, it is a good learning tool, but it does make you a more rounded and schooled musician. But the minus side is that you don't necessarily develop a personal approach. Yeah. And you know, I can include anybody in this, Pat Metheny, you know, whoever. They've all got their way. Everybody over the age now of about 60. Nobody under 60. Everybody under that age went to college and learn properly and learn scientifically and so, you know, everything is swings and roundabouts in life, and the swing is that you have your own take on it, and the roundabout is that there's loads of things that you can't do.
This actually backs up a lot of things that, you know, because I've always been interested in how the sort of the anomalies of music, because obviously there were lots of great guitar players around, as you've already cited. You know, you had there were
later on. There weren't when I started. Luckily, anyway.
In the world of jazz, there were some incredible players.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. Oh yeah. Talk about the greats, yeah.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that you get somebody. We're obviously going to come on to people like Jimi Hendrix, you know, people who are this sort of anomaly, and I would say Django Reinhardt was this as well. You know, the fact that he was crippled in his hand meant that he had to do things differently, and also, of course, he was illiterate. There's no way that even if the books were available, that Django could have gone and bought a book about how to play like whoever.
Yeah, of course. So that's almost like being blind. You develop your ear stronger.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, we can include Art Tatum in that sort of thing.
So your ear becomes enormous, and you know, if you've got the talent like Django, and yes, I mean, he's a case in point. I mean, Interestingly enough, I didn't really discover this for years, but that if you if you could call it his basic style, the basic sound of his was actually the kind of current way that gypsy guitarists sounded in 1934.
Yeah.
If you listen to Bullo, Ferre and people. But the thing is about Django, and why I think actually the legacy of Reinhardt is more with the Ferre brothers, which is maybe getting a bit arcane, but the Ferre brothers were a family of guitarists who carried on through life, through the generations. And they seem to be much more manouche gypsy in their playing than Django. Django became more and more jazz, more and more improvisational. In fact, Bullo Ferre said, I wasn't frightened of Django's technique because Bullo, I mean, the first record of Django Reinhardt playing guitar, he's playing rhythm for Bullo Ferre. And the track starts off with this incredible lick that you think is Django, and in fact it's Bullo Ferre. But they didn't improvise. So Django's thing was this melding of this style, if you like, with Louis Armstrong's jazz, Yeah. And that's where the genius of Django is.
Yeah.
In the creativity in the moment, which none of them could match, and they still don't actually. Yeah. They do the chops and they do the technique and they have incredible ability, but that off the wall creativity that Django had, that was very special for him. But of course, as you say, I mean, if he had full command of all his fingers, he might have followed the jazz guitar style of the time, which was that, just dropped me plectrum, but it's this thing. So hang on. So if you got a break in you do something like that, because you'd be playing an acoustic guitar, so you'd play a big chord break, and of course Django couldn't do chord breaks particularly. I mean, he could get around quite a few chords, but so he'd already developed the single line thing was the gypsy thing, but he developed that obviously over his chord work because he had to. So there you go. Necessity becomes the mother of
invention,
of perfect invention.
Yes, to quote Frank Zappa again.
To drop my plectrum down, that's great, isn't it? Yes. First rule, the 15-year-old guitarist gets up to do his solo, drops his plectrum.
Sometimes that's a great technical development, according to Jeff. Yes. Anyway,
it is. Bloody well is. It bloody well is. I tell you what, I mean, you get much more. I mean, honestly, I don't know why we've carried on with these pick things, but I mean, I've got so used to playing 50 years with a pick, 70%, 60% of the time, that Jeff Beck's right. I mean, you're playing and there's this bit of plastic between you and.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
It's very weird. It's very peculiar. And there's an Italian guitarist called, I don't know if you've heard him, a young bloke called Matteo Mancuso, who's absolutely unreal technically.
Right.
And he plays, like that. He plays like that. It's ridiculous what he does, So anyway, I use the pick and that's what I'm used to. Well, actually, get back to the pick. I mean, the point about the pick was the whole thing with guitar before the revolution in 1937, 38 with electricity was trying to get volume.
Yes.
But if you've got a steel string guitar, if you play it with a pick hard, you're going to get more volume than you would with your fingers. Yeah. So that's why the pick was popular, Same thing with the banjo. You strum the steel string with your pick, because if you play with your fingers, first of all, you rip off your nails. Secondly, it's much softer on an acoustic guitar. So when somebody like Charlie Christian, for instance, who'd been playing acoustic guitar and jamming microphones into it, and so when he finally got the Gibson 150 that Gibson put out first in 1937, I think, might have been 1936. When he got that, and he obviously carried on with the pick because he wanted to play single lines. That's the other thing. He wanted to play single lines like a saxophone.
Yeah.
Jazz guitarists always, apart from Django, always wanted to sound like saxophone players.
Yeah.
So you played a single line, and then you used the pick. That's a hangover from the acoustic days, and it just carried on. And of course, you know, the most famous and best. I don't know if you. I was just playing. I was doing all that. I don't know if that got on the.
Yeah, I think you did actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's Wes Montgomery with the thumb, you know.
Yeah.
And the thumb immediately makes it more connected sound.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm quite convinced that if Wes Montgomery had played what he did with a pick, we wouldn't be talking about Wes Montgomery now.
No.
Even if he played the same lines, he wouldn't. And a friend of mine, a very, very talented guitarist called Remy Harris, suggested, he said, actually, he reckons that the thumb, because of its softness, means that the attack is just a nanosecond behind the beat. So that gives you a laid back kind of feeling. So that, I don't know if that's scientifically real, but it could well be, because these fractional things are absolutely vital. And Wes's time is one of the things that is, you know, his sense of time and rhythm is one of the most important things about his playing. And it wouldn't be the same with the pick. It really wouldn't. I reckon you could practice Wes Montgomery lines with the pick, and they're not nothing. They're great lines, but that they would be a percentage of the effectiveness would be lost.
I think you're right there, because there's something about the mellowness of his sound that is,
exactly, absolutely.
Because again, you know, there's a lot of guitarists who've used octaves in other genres that don't sound anything like that. It's a completely
no,
and they're playing it with a pick, you know.
Yeah, exactly. If you play octaves with a pick, it doesn't sound anything like that.
Absolutely.
Well, of course, the octave thing came from Django. Django was the first to play those octaves.
Yes.
And Wes got that from him. And so, I mean, Django was a real, particularly in the, you know, between 1934 and probably 1944, 45. It's the whole thing, really. It's like, you know, Reinhardt and Jimi Hendrix, really, you could say, are the, in a completely different way, you know, utterly different. But, you know, both of them I think of as not really influences, but as inspirations. There's influences and inspirations. I mean, the great influence in what you'd call jazz is Charlie Christian. And of course, the great influence in blues rock guitar really is, first of all, Chuck Berry, then Eric Clapton. And these people are the major influences. And then, of course, there are probably later ones, but they were across the board influence, you know, whereas Hendrix is like, it was such a complete kind of experience that it's sort of stunning, but I don't think necessarily, I'd say that's what I'd really make a difference between inspiring and influencing. You know. Anyway, that's another question.
So tell me, let's go back to, you know, you've said that you were at public school and you were.
Oh God!
But so when did you start actually getting out playing? It must have been.
You mean properly? You mean I've been professional since 1970, so I wasn't really, because I went to university as well. Very odd, because I played in 1967. I was playing with a band, and we were doing quite well. In fact, Jimi Hendrix liked me. Actually, he was very complimentary. I
wanted to go to that because you told me this about him.
Yeah. I mean, they were very encouraging to me, because I was already doing. I wasn't copying. Well, particularly Eric. And when I heard Eric, I thought, well, I'm not going to copy that. And I couldn't believe how everybody just ripped it off. Yeah. Immediately, and I thought it was disgusting. I was really, you know, there's a Charlie Mingus thing about if. Charlie Parker had a machine gun, how many dead copycats would there be? And it was the same with this. I couldn't believe these people. And I'd go, oh, God, they'd all get their Les Pauls and their Marshalls and get that sound and then claim that they were listening to the blues. I mean, it was so fraudulent. It really irritated me. I can't tell you how. So I made a conscious effort not to play like that. fact, I probably play that more now than I did then. So I was doing this sort of jazzy, rocky kind of thing. And they kind of took to it, you know. They didn't go mad, but they were very complimentary about it, you know, both of them, and were very.
How did you meet Hendrickson?
Hendricks I met because there used to be a place called the Speakeasy in Margaret Street, which was a club. You got to remember, this scene was very, very tiny in those days. It was almost like the jazz scene. So Speakeasy was almost like the bar at Ronnie Scott's downstairs. And all the guys used to go there and sort of hang about. And I had this little band. It wasn't my band, but I joined it. And the drummer, a guy called Rob Lipson, who let me play with a band called Gracious, he was actually a very, very good drummer. He was the best thing in our band. And but he was also quite forthright and pushy. And he was down the Speakeasy. Somehow he got himself down the Speakeasy. I don't know how he kind of one of these guys who gets to know everybody. And he got down the Speakeasy and there was a band on, and he went out, and Hendricks was hanging about, and he went over to Hendricks. This will be about December 66, something like that, or January 67. And he said, "Oh, this band's rubbish, Jimmy. Our band is fantastic. You should hear us." So Jimmy went, "Yeah, man, I'd like to, you know." So he went over, just had a word with the manager. The manager spoke, Rob went and spoke to the manager. The manager said, "All right, you can play half an hour on Sunday to open up." I can't remember what we opened up for. Anyway, so he came rushing back. You know, we were at college trying to get exams in Notting Hill Gate, and came rushing back and said, "Whoa, we're playing on Sunday at the Speakeasy." And we go, whoa, bloody hell, you know. And so everybody, you see, like all these seminal events, everybody in this band, and they're all still with us, and occasionally I speak to them, and they've all got different memories of this event. My memory of this event, according to the singer, we played really well for 2 or 3 tunes and then fell apart. I remember we had dinner before the gig, and Jimmy came over to speak to us. And he sat down and had dinner with us, you know, and I piped up because Are You Experienced had just been released. And, you know, I'd seen him play loads around the little clubs, Marquee and the Ricky Tick circuit, which was a circuit of clubs, you know, where you go and see, you know, 100 people, no seats, just 100 people in a club. And he played all those places. And, you know, so I'd seen him a lot, you know, and, you know, he wasn't yet Jimi Hendrix, but we all thought, you know, he was fantastic because he sort of came out, and you can imagine in sort of suburbia in 1966, 67, a guy like that was just the way he looked for a start was like incredibly exotic, you know, and his performance was fantastic. I mean, I think his performances were at their best then because he was so light-hearted and so fast and quick. I mean, his movements were so quick, and his movements and the way the music all tied together and the improvisationalness of it was fantastic. Anyway, so he sat down and I said, "Oh, I didn't like the guitar sound on Are You Experienced?" And he went, "Oh, man." And what I meant was, it doesn't sound like your live sound.
Oh,
and it wasn't until he got to Electric Ladyland, it didn't really sound. It didn't have the bass, you know. It sounded like it was on low volume with a fuzz box. I mean, he's great playing and he's wild and it's brilliant, but just the sound wasn't. Anyway, he looked quite crestfallen. You know, you always think somebody like that won't take any notice of some pimply 17-year-old. But anyway, he was all right. You know, he was fine. And then we played, and I played, and you know, the band played, and Rob was going out with Bernard Braden's daughter, Kim Braden, and she was sitting next to Jimmy, you know, and she said, "Oh, he's going mad, and he really dug it." And then I was sitting in the corner, and he came right over as he was going out. He saw me, and he came over, and he went, "Oh man, yeah, that was great. You know, I really enjoyed that. It was fantastic." So, well, people didn't throw the word "fantastic" around in those days. He just went, "Hey man, that was great." Yeah. And so he was going, and we played with Clapton, and he was very encouraging. So, but the funny thing was, I then went, "Oh no, I'm off to university." which it's a kind of weird kind of thing, a classic kind of thing of half iconoclastic and half conventional, you know. And my parents wanted me to go to university, and so and I must say the band wasn't really fit for purpose anyway. But you know, so I missed out 1967 to 1970. But when I came back in 1970, there was plenty going on.
Yeah.
You know, who knows what, but I slotted into stuff pretty quickly because, you know, as I say, I had this sort of way of playing which was slightly different. And by the time, particularly by the time I got back to London in 1970, everybody was so fed up with the Clapton thing. And you go to an audition and everybody be playing, you know, more or less like Eric, with a more or less beautiful tone and slightly better phrasing or slightly less better phrasing, or and then I'd do something slightly different. And after they'd heard 19 guitarists, and I'd get up and do something slightly different, they go, "Ooh," you know. So I guess I probably was playing something like, if you think of Pete Banks from Yes, or something kind of. I mean, you know, I'm not comparing us the quality of our play, but something along those lines, sort of kind of jazzy, rocky, early jazzy rock, you know. And then of course I was blown away by John McLaughlin, Extrapolation, and In a Silent Way and things like that. And so that really pulled me back into the jazz world, as it were. And I really stopped listening to anything except that kind of music, you know, Miles and McLaughlin and things after that for ages. And you know, I went out on a kind of limb, but I carried on playing. I was playing in the kind of progressive rock area, but my interest was very much that kind of.
You cited 1970 as being when you really started.
Yeah, 1970 I started. So I'm 50 years in the business now.
Yeah, yeah. So what band did you join then? Or was there a succession?
Well, I tell you what I did was there was a succession. So I came down and. There again, the method, which of course would seem very arcane now. The method was you got the Melody Maker on Thursday, and in the back of the Melody Maker they'd have adverts, musicians wanted. They'd have the musicians wanted page, and people would buy a little box, and they'd say guitarist wanted, must read, busk and travel, or something like that, or must have own equipment or own car preferred.
Yeah.
We will be very cruel to time wasters.
Yeah.
So every Thursday, I'd get the Melody Maker, and there'd be a phone number, and I'd go down. I didn't have a phone in my little flat. Go down to the bottom of the place where I was living, get my coins out, dial the number. Hello, mate. Hello, I'm a guitar player. I'd like to do the audition. Where is it? Oh, you know, the Dog and Prime Minister in Finchley Road, like 2:00. Yeah, okay, see you there. Boom. So you go up to the Dog and Prime Minister with your guitar. Didn't bring an amp, obviously they don't amps, and they'd be sitting there. That would be the drummer you'd speak to, the drummer and the bass player, and there'd be a line of guitar players, and you go and play. And they go, well, yeah, like that, yeah, just have your number. And then you phone you up and go, yeah, well, the band's looking, we've got a contract with Transatlantic or something like that, you know. And so I sort of joined, but I was very snobby because I had this jazz snobbiness, you know. I was very snobby picking. I kept on leaving these bands after sort of a few weeks. No kind of particular, because basically what I'm doing, there'd be sort of rehearsal, there'd be a bit of rehearsal, and it was. You got to remember, this is 1970. Everything was very shambolic, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It's all really kind of, you know, flares and lots of dope and everybody. So, you know, these bands. And then finally, so I played, there was a regular-ish band called Abednego that I joined that was doing time signatures. That was like jazz rock. So the guy running that liked me because I was by then I was seriously into. I had a little kind of Guild guitar that really had no sustain, so I was playing lots of lines and sort of McLaughlin-y kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this band, Abednego, which had in its ranks John Altman, who's a very well-known film composer, and Linton Naif, who joined from a band called Affinity that had been quite famous. And so I went through lots of personnel, and we did the first sort of foreign tour. I went to Holland and things like that. And so that was kind of regular. Anyway, this all went on, and then I answered an advert that turned out to be Darrell Way from Curved Air forming his own band. This was towards the end of 1972, and because I'd done lots of other work as well. I mean, tons of stuff. I'd been in an Irish show band, and I'd played sort of background music in the West End, and just kind of doing anything really. And this Darrell Way band, he did the audition, and he said, "Well, I like your playing, don't like your image, but I like your playing." I remember that. He phoned me up and he said, or I phoned him or phoned me up, and he said, "Yeah, like your playing, don't like your image. You'll have to get some clothes." So I went, "Oh, okay, whatever." And anyway, so what happened with that was that I started playing, and we started rehearsing. And this is 1972, when things were still going really strong. And all these record companies started appearing. And then Chris Welch, the melody maker, came down, and he really took a shine to me, and he wrote me up big time, and which was great, because it really helped me, because I in those days, the melody maker was like a Bible, and everyone read, and he was going on about me and, really raving. And which was, it was a bit frightening for me, actually, because the melody maker was my gospel, and then where I'd sort of read things like really carefully and really get into the articles. And then it reminded me of, there's a thing in Woody Allen's Side Effects where he finds himself in Madame Bovary on page 83. And he's in Madame Bovary, he's going, "What? I'm in Madame Bovary." And I felt about the melody maker. I mean, somebody said, "Have you seen the melody maker?" And I read it, and I read this extravagant thing, and I went, "Oh no." And I was just hearing around 1971, I started hearing guitarists that were really blowing my mind. Ollie Halsall, Albert Lee, later on Holsworth. And I was thinking, oh, no. These are guys that are so bloody amazing. And yet nobody's writing rave articles about them. I don't deserve this. I was really quite embarrassed, actually. And but it sort of spurred me on, but I was kind of freaked by it. But anyway, it meant that people like Max Clifford was our publicist, by the way. Cool. Yeah, he was our publicist. And of course, he was going, "Oh, Chris Welch loves you. That's worth £100,000 in the bloody." Anyway, so we got a very good deal. Oh, well, now you'd think it was an extraordinary deal. And then it was a reasonable deal, £27,000 in 1972 to make 3 albums, which is what the equivalent of £300,000 now. Which was considered a reasonable deal, nothing exceptional. Darrell went off and bought a house in Windsor with it, So this was the music business in the 1970s. There was just money raining down, and we just took it all for granted. I didn't get it. I mean, Darrell put us on a wage, of course, and bought a house in Datchet in Windsor. But I mean, it was his name that had got the advance there. Yeah. And then we started making these albums, and there again, I mean, the first one I was absolutely mortified because I didn't really. It's quite a good album now when I listen to it, but I didn't play how I wanted to play. But the second one, I began to get some of my sort of licks off on the album, And I was quite pleased with that, and Chris Welch sort of raved about it, and so that sort of put me on the map, actually, me individually, and a lot of things I think flowed from that. I mean, I kind of the band Wolf kind of folded up, and I ran into Alan Holsworth, who I'd spoken to, who was with the Soft Machine, and I ran into him in the guitar shop, and he said, "Oh, what are you doing, man?" I said, "Nothing," and he took my number, and he recommended me to the Soft Machine, who wouldn't have heard of me at all because they were firmly in the jazz world, which I wasn't in, even though I loved the jazz world. I used to go to all the gigs, and I was totally in awe of all these people I used to see, like Art Thiemann and Alan Jackson and Dave McRae, and these were my heroes. I was in sort of progressive rock, but I'd go to these little clubs like the Phoenix in wherever and see these people and sort of worship them from afar. So Roy Babington and John Marshall were absolutely kind of sort of people I were in awe of. So when I got there again, I saw the Soft Machine with Holsworth and Larry Coryell's 11th House, and was like, I was
the gig.
Yeah, the Rainbow. Yeah,
Wow.
February 75, and then there was a friend of mine who was a complete Soft Machine nut, and he had bundles and he was playing it, and then a couple of weeks later I phoned him up and I said, Dave, he said, hello man, how are you doing? I said, I've joined the Soft Machine. He went, what? What? He was completely kind of like, what?
That's amazing.
And anyway, so I mean, it was funny how it worked with them, because they hadn't heard of me, because they were in there. They auditioned a lot of the guys from their area.
So
I've been thinking, what?
They were down in Canterbury, weren't they, originally?
No, yeah, originally, but basically they'd never had a guitar. They didn't want to have a guitar, and so there were lots of things going on with the Soft Machine. It was a pretty unhappy situation for all of them. They weren't very happy with what was going on, but they'd got a guitar in, a Holsworth, and they made an album, Bundles. Now, I think all this really was kind of lucky for me, because naturally they liked saxophones. They didn't really like us. They were like typical jazz musicians. They heard saxophones. Jazz guys of that era in the 70s really didn't hear guitar. They only had guitars because Miles had one. Yes. Miles had John McLaughlin. Yes. So suddenly they thought, well, we better have a guitar.
Yeah.
It's good for popularity and everything. We don't really like it, but let's have a guitar. So they had, also, of course, that was fantastic. And but they had the album with guitar to publicise. He left the moment the album came out. He was off with Tony Williams.
Oh, right.
So they had to publicise this album, and I think they'd seen a few of the guitarists from their world, and they really weren't suitable. And they came to see me. I was playing with a band called the Global Village Trucking Company, which was a hippie band, and really enjoyed. I loved it. Lovely people. I loved doing it, but it was very kind of low key. It was almost like the Grateful Dead. So I was really, I don't force things, and I was just, happily chugging away, playing a little bit of, lead guitar, but I was just sort of enjoying the vibe of the band. And suddenly it turned out that they'd come to hear me play with this band, and I just went, oh God. And apparently John Marshall had said to Carl Jenkins, he said, he can't play. And luckily Carl said, I think he can,
Oh, wow.
So back to London, I phoned them up and I said, please, let's do a proper audition. Somehow I had the manager's number, which was great. And so we got together and we did a proper audition, and I played, I gave it my full-on thing as far as I could, and they were fine with it. And of course, in a way, they were very relieved, because they needed to publicise this album with a guitarist or give up on the album. And so that was great. So I joined them, and then that was a terrific break. And then from that, anyway. Do you want to intersperse with do you want to divert me?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by this, because I mean, obviously, for the guitarists who listen to this, it's like it's a bit of a jaw dropping, Alan Holdsworth, and it's I just took over from Alan Holdsworth, and it's
right. Well, there again, yes, even then, actually, and particularly as I'd seen them, and I did find it pretty challenging. And because the real challenge was that, because he really played kind of endlessly, and they only really had 2 or 3 tunes. And if I wasn't feeling kind of quite up to it, the gig would only last about 35 minutes, because it relied on me doing really, really, really long. Initially, This was in the first, really long guitar solos. And so I ended up setting up a guitar. I ended up getting a Gibson SG Custom, and guitars that guitars moved on technologically, but the guitars that were easy to play, and setting that in a way that I could. But I did okay. I did. I know. I did all right, and that definitely was a challenge. There's no doubt about that. Later on, of course, when we got, Alan Wakeman joined, so there was another soloist, and it became more communal. But in that initial period, it was just about these tunes with these incredibly long guitar solos, and done that before. Yeah. So it was quite challenging, and I really did. It cost me a lot of emotional effort, actually. It was hard, but it was hard, but rewarding in the sense that I really did feel that, I'm sure there are always people that you don't know about, but the people I know about, I thought, well, I think I'm the only person who can do this after him. Yeah. So I was quite pleased with that. I remember people used to come up and go, man, I never thought they'd ever get anybody when Alan left, and you were doing a great job, So that was nice. I've been in plenty of bands where I thought, well, hundreds of people could do what I'm doing, probably better. But in this band, I didn't feel like at that time, 1975, that there was anybody that I knew of that could do it better. So I was, in that sense, I was gave me confidence, although it was enormously nerve-wracking in a sense.
This is fascinating, actually, John, because obviously a lot of guitar players, if you're old enough, you'd sort of look back and go, right, well, to be able to find a guitarist who could do originally Soft Machine, to try and find a guitarist who could do the saxophone type of
exactly. That's what
that was a difficult ask in itself. So Alan Holdsworth is obviously a great sort of choice on that. And then, of course, then you sort of go, right, well, if he walks out, who else is there?
Exactly. That's where they were at. And of course, if he'd walked out before they made the album, they would have got a sax player in and made the album with a sax player. Because Soft Machine was known as the band that didn't have guitar, so having guitar was quite controversial. So, if he'd walked out before, I thought about this recently. It just occurred to me recently. If he'd walked out before they'd made the album, maybe they'd have made the album with a saxophone, and then there was that. Then I wouldn't have had the job, and then of course from that gig I got the Stephane Grappelli gig, and everything sort of fell into place. It did all start with Chris Welch, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yes, I think it's really interesting because again, there's a lot of little threads here. With the fact that
it's red.
Well, because you were listening to, obviously, from early days of people like Django and Charlie Christian, who were sort of innovators in their style. Being able to play single line melodies again, like a saxophone or a trumpet or whatever. It's a main line melody. Whereas, always so instead of it just being the standard, you're going to do the sort of, Freddie Green type chord vamp type thing. And again, really, that sort of set you up for that ability to be able to because it's really difficult to solo for a long time. I think
it is. Once you're used to it, when you get used to it, it's easy.
Yes.
Like anything else in life.
It's being able
but if you're thrown in at the deep end like that, which I was, it took me a few gigs to kind of and of course they were it was all messed up. The relations in the band were all messed up, so nobody was really talking to anybody. So that made it hard as well. Right. The atmosphere of the band wasn't good. But I still feel proud of it. It was great. And of course, now we carried on with the Soft Machine, reformed as the Soft Machine Legacy in 2004, which we should have straight off called the Soft Machine because we had Elton Dean, Hugh Hopper, John Marshall, and myself. And now we've dropped the Legacy thing, called it Soft Machine. I just love it. It's my, if you like, it's my young adult roots.
Yes.
That's where I'm at. If people say, what a bit of your playing, because I've played all sorts of things since then, what of your playing do you really feel is most you? And I'd say the soft machine thing. That is absolutely me. And certainly in 1975, 76, 77, I was, you know, as it were, in the, you know, without, I don't want to say it in a conceited way, but sort of at the forefront of where guitar was.
Yes.
You know, and then of course, what happens? Bound to happen. Then younger people come along, and you're no longer in the forefront of where guitar was. But you know, for that period, I was, and you know, there was a few of us, and Alan was, you know, the king really. There were a few of us that were kind of doing that, and so it's a good feeling, you know.
Yeah.
And I carried on the same thing when I played with Stephane Grappelli. I didn't play like Django. I sort of played almost the same style on acoustic guitar.
So how did you get that then? Because that's a bit of a lang.
Well, that came through the same thing, through the soft machine. Basically, we played. We had a television spot on the Newcastle Jazz Festival, and we got introduced by Spike Milligan. Not at the time, but they dubbed on Spike Milligan, who went, "Soft machine." I had a friend, he said, "I can't wait to see this band." So we left. Soft machine. They filled the Albert Hall. They left a tap running in the dressing room. Anyway, that's not very fun. Anyway, so we had a TV spot, and we did, I don't know, 25 minutes. And it was on BBC Two, which in those days was a pretty big deal.
Yeah,
in fact, you see, in those days, you couldn't get a recording of it. You never heard it. If you were doing a gig the night of the TV broadcast, you never heard it.
No.
I didn't see that for years and years and years. And I remember my dad recorded it off the television by placing a microphone just onto a tape recorder. By placing a microphone next to the television, it sounded pretty bloody awful. And I thought, oh God. But anyway, it can't have been that bad, because a vibraphone player called Pete Shade was minding his own business walking along Oxford Street, and he bumped into Diz Disley.
Oh, right.
Diz Disley said, "Oh, I'm looking for a young guitar player, and you know, to play with Stephane." And Pete Shade said, "Well, I saw this bloke last night," and luckily he didn't sort of go, "Well, he was playing a solid guitar, jazz, rock." He said, "I just saw this guy last night. He was really good, you know." So suddenly, out of the blue, the phone goes, "Hello, it's Diz Disley here." I went, "What?" He said, "Can I come round and see you?" You know. So he appears, and I said, "Oh, hello." And he said, "Oh, you know." I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "We're looking for a guitar player." I said, "Well, what about Ike?" He said, No, Ike." I said, No. Getting rid of him. Too many bald heads on the stage. God, he'd had a massive falling out with Ike Isaacs, you know. So he, of whom Stephane Grappelli was very fond, actually, Ike Isaacs. He liked Ike Isaacs because Ike played all these fabulous chords and harmonies behind Stephane, which is all he cared about with a guitar player.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw Stephane Grappelli being interviewed on the Simon D show in about 1964. He came on, and Simon D said, "Oh, and you played with one of the greatest guitarists ever, Django Reinhardt." And Stephane Grappelli said, "Yes, he always played the right chords behind me." Right. At the time, I thought that was very peculiar, but when I got to know him, really, all he cared about was guitar, was whether you played the right chords behind it.
Amazing.
You know, of course, I played some lovely chords behind it. So when you came to be soloing, he'd switched off, you know. No, he hadn't actually. That's not true. But he didn't take it as the main priority. So anyway, so Pete Shade recommended me to Diz, and so Diz came round and we played a few bits of Tweet Georgia Brown, which I kind of knew, and he said, "Oh, well, you'll come to Hamburg and do a TV show," and then anyway. So we went to an incredibly long story, which I won't go into now. I think I've probably told it quite so many times. You know, incredibly long, hilarious story, which ended up with Stephane going, "Well, I like him, he's a nice boy." And so then Diz said, "Right, we've got this world tour." And I said, "Well, I'm in the soft machine, actually, Diz." And I wasn't playing hard to get. I actually said to him, "Well, you know, I can't really do this. I'm in the soft machine." He couldn't believe it. So it doubled. It's all worked out quite well, even though it wasn't my intention. He doubled his efforts. He says, well, I'm offering you this 3 months with Stephane Grappelli, not some beat group. I'm going to speak to your wife. You'll be earning lots of money and all this. And anyway, so I hummed and hawed, and eventually I went to the soft machine and said, look, I've been offered 3 months with Stephane Grappelli. I mean, have you got any gigs? And they had 2 or 3 gigs. And they said, go on, do it. And they got Alan. Alan was always sort of flitting between Britain and America, and sort of in and out of Tony Williams or whatever. It's always a bit chaotic. And they got him to do the gigs that, and I they played in Portugal, and I found the program, and it said, Alan Holdsworth, Holesworth, replaces Alan Holdsworth for tonight's performance. Because obviously they printed a thing with me or something. Anyway, so I went off for 3 months with Grappelli and Disley, which was fabulous. Fabulous, absolutely fantastic. Yeah. I mean, such a relief. That's a relief from the soft machine.
Yeah. It's great fun playing those sort of tunes that you've heard.
Oh, brilliant! And people would go, "Oh, you're following Django." I go, "No, I'm not," because I'd heard records of Stephane playing with any number of mediocre guitar players, so I didn't feel like I was on the spot at all. No. And he was really encouraging. And I, as I say, I played. If you look at the Albert Hall concert, which is from '78, I'm just playing kind of how I played. I didn't. There's hardly anything Django-y about it at all. And he liked that. He said, "Oh, don't play like him. Don't do that. Do your thing." And when I did anything kind of like played a 4th chord or something kind of modern, he go, "Oh, I like that. Oh, I like it. I can't change my own thing, baby, because I'm so old. But I like to hear that." You see, and he was really encouraging, and we got on great, and it was all, the first few years were brilliant, and also it was such a relief because he was so he was serious but not solemn about it all.
No,
and the post-mortems and those sort of everybody looking at their boots in the dressing room, either furious with somebody else or full of self-loathing, which was the kind of classic, jazz rock 70s thing. You're all in the dressing room, "Oh, play crap. Oh, I'm useless," all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just youth, really. It's just being young.
Yeah.
And so there was none of that. And it was absolutely, so liberating. And I got this thing, which, of course, in a sense, this is what I was with the soft machine, but I had responsibility in the soft machine because I was the only soloist, really. I mean, Mike did a bit, but Mike was Rattledge, that's Mike Rattledge, but he was phasing himself out. So in that sense, you've really got, but with Stephane, he's the gig, he's carrying the gig, and you're a featured sideman, which is just wonderful because there isn't the responsibility on you. The responsibility is on him to deliver. But if you play something really good, everybody goes, "Whoa, I want to see Stephane Grappelli. Oh, he was wonderful." And he had that young guitar player. He was really good. It's like a sort of bonus. And so, and of course, you get lots of space because he liked to sit on his chair and sort of half go to sleep. So you'd have long solos.
Yeah, that's great.
And it was lovely. And also it worked very well. It worked very well in the sense that Grappelli's playing, it was always quite similar. So for the first 3 or 4 tunes, people were entranced, and then they were ready to hear something else. Now, he played the piano, but also they'd be ready to hear you. It wasn't like, "Oh, no, we don't, let's wait for the next Grappelli solo," because they then get interested in you. After 2 or 3 tunes, hearing him, they then get interested in what you were doing or what the guitar players were doing. So it was a great gig for the guitar players. And of course, then there's the whole Django thing. "Oh, you're following Django and this, that, and the other." I mean, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And as I say, sort of, you really wanted to play well, but you didn't have to play well to carry the gig, So if you had an off day, it didn't really matter, I mean, you never have a horribly off day.
No, but I know what you mean.
A relatively off day, it wasn't really a big deal, you know. So you feel you could relax and just enjoy it, you know. And of course, the atmosphere of his gigs was just so celebratory. I mean, the first time I played with him, and the door opens and people come rushing in and going, "Oh, Mr. Grappelli, that was a wonderful one." I thought, and he just looked kind of, you know, and I thought, he's taking this very calmly, you know, everybody raving about the show and how marvellous it is. He's taking it so calmly. And then I realised it happened every time.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, there are thousands of stories about that playing with him that were just brilliant. I mean, I don't think there was a bad, you know, with him it was just great, because his attitude, you know, he was 70, so his attitude was brilliant. He played absolutely as well as he could, but, you know, the violin would go in the case and then it'd be like, let's go and eat, let's go let's go and hang out. And of course you're hanging out all over America and touring America endlessly, and clubs and people really enthusiastic, and it's just, you know, you can't be beaten, really. I mean, that was just fantastic. And you know, so that was that, you know, it was really something else.
So how long did you do that for?
About 5 years.
Yeah.
And then things slightly, you know, there was a few issues came up, which unfortunately, the problem is there's always, you know, the worms of entropy appear in every situation.
Yes.
You know, let's leave it like that. I don't want to go into it, but it sort of finished, you know, and I was a bit mortified, really. But in a way I wasn't, because I'd done it, you know. I'd done it. It was a fairly static situation, actually. You know, and then in the 80s, everything changed for me. It was like, oh, the 80s, what a disaster. I mean, I think this decade has been equivalently bad. Probably worse, actually, yes. I would say. The 80s were just, oh, God, the 80s. You know, everything you can think of in a life, for me, sort of went wrong, really. But I carried on playing, and I trundled along. The only people that I kind of knew to turn to was the jazz scene, who accepted me because I played with Stephane Grappelli. So really, if I'd had the kind of character that's necessary, I would have, like, in 81, 82, sort of go, right, form a band, do this, get this, maybe go to America or something. But I really haven't got that kind of, you know, I know Pat Metheny quite well socially. You know, he's got that force of nature. You know, he's got that will and the drive, and I'm not just talking about musically, but just to get things together. And it took me years to develop that. It came slowly, and then I became quite a good band leader, I think, but it came slowly. So at the time, it was just like, okay. So between about 81 and probably 88, 89, I played in practically, you know, it was like hundreds of gigs a year, always with different people every night. And, you know, it was just like kind of with no plan, just playing. And of course, there were millions of gigs in those days, so I never stopped. The jazz scene, because of the Grappelli thing, accepted me, and then people liked me, and you know, I just played with everybody. And kind of, there were a few regular-ish things like Michael Garrick or John Stevens, or they were kind of regular, but it was like pickup gigs, you know, every day. You know, every day I'd be playing with somebody, and that kind of has gone on forever, you know. And my mother used to say, "Do you ever take the wrong guitar?" So that was, I learned proper jazz, if you like. I learned that jazz, what we call straight jazz, you know, mainstream jazz or modern jazz. I learned that by teaching it. Yeah. You know, I got offered like teaching at Wavendon and places, Wavendon courses like that. I didn't know anything. I've been playing by ear, really. And so people would come up to me and go, "Oh, John, or Mr. Etheridge, when you got that thing, do you play the altered scale on that?" And I go, "Oh, I'll get back to you." And rush home, do some church and come back. And of course, that was great. So I absorbed under pressure a hell of a lot of jazz theory between about 1980 and 92, 83. And I really know that whole book backwards, actually. What you know, the whole bebop book, what you could play, what you can't play, what's acceptable, how it's constructed, what the systems are. I mean, these aren't necessarily conscious systems, but what the underlying systems are, etc. Because I've got quite an analytical mind, and so I started teaching a lot, you know, because there again, it was anything to kind of keep going. To generate income. So teaching, I did loads and loads of teaching. So I got very fluent at the kind of, meanwhile, I was absorbing it myself into my playing, you know, this theory that I didn't really have under my belt. I wasn't just completely an ear player. I wasn't. I mean, I had Django and Joe Pass and stuff, but to really get into what and I spent, you know, years sort of analysing like Schofield or McCoy Tyner or something, working out a kind of outside playing and what this involved and what this was about, what that was about. So it was great, actually, in a way, because it was very good, because I then felt that I actually knew I wasn't just sort of winging on a bluff. Which, of course, winging it on a bluff is the best way. You know, the greatest players to me, say if I listen to Jim Hall, I can hear that a lot of times it's not like I've got this totally pat. He's winging it, you know. Winging it is creative. Winging it is really what it's about. But it's kind of nerve-wracking. It's kind of better when you feel I know exactly what's going on here, and but then it's probably not better for the audience, you know. That's why Miles Davis would always try and make people feel uncomfortable. You know. Anyway, sorry, I'm waffling away.
No, that's really good, because, you know, there's a lot. You was talking about Miles Davis, and there was I think it was, well, it must have been John McLaughlin talking about, it was John McLaughlin talking about turning up for the first sort of rehearsal with Miles Davis, and he'd written out loads of scores, which Miles Davis tore up or screwed up and chucked it on the floor. I said, no.
That was Joe Zawinul, actually. Joe Zawinul.
Oh, was it Joe Zawinul, was it? Okay.
Well, he had his score for In a Silent Way, and then Miles said to McLaughlin, play the guitar like you don't know how to play it. Now, that is wonderful. I actually almost consciously try to do that sometimes with the soft machine. I think when we're doing a proper improvisation, you know, from nothing improvisation, I think, you know, if it sounds too conscious, sounds contrived, but I just think, forget all what I know, my chops. I'm just going to let the thing, you know, I was, sorry, this follows on from this, what you're saying about McLaughlin in a silent way. I got my partner bought me some Jimi Hendrix stuff for Christmas, which is a concert, was in Hawaii or something. Of course, I haven't listened to these sort of heroes. They're part of you. You don't actually consciously listen to them for years and years and years. And I put this on, and what was happening was exactly what I like to happen with the pedals. I like the pedals actually to kind of take me where they want to go, you know. So rather than something happens with the pedal, you go, no, that's not how I programmed it. It's like, that's why I like analog pedals. You sort of hit a few of them, and then something happens, and it goes. So that's what Miles was getting at with McLaughlin and the introduction to In a Silent Way. You know, play it in E, play like you don't know how to play the guitar, and that's actually brilliant, because you know, it militates against glibness. There can't be glibness when that's going on, and of course, you know, In a Silent Way, and to a certain extent, extrapolation. McLaughlin sounds to me wonderful on those. I'm sure to himself he's going, oh God, well, I didn't get any of my good licks off, you know, etc. And I'm sure I've got recordings like that where I think, oh, I didn't really get any of my hot licks off, and people go, oh, I really like you playing on that, because, you know, that's what Miles did. He wouldn't let you get comfortable, and that's very good, you know, very good, because you know, people don't like glibness. Audiences do not like, musicians love to be glib and in control, you know. It turns them on. It doesn't turn them on, it makes them feel comfortable. They feel comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're going to play a blues in B flat. Really, I know where this is going. Yeah, yeah. Go on to automatic pilot, got all my licks, you know. But audiences really hate that. They don't like that feeling. You know, and they get that feeling from certain players, and then other players, like we go back to someone like Jim Hall, who didn't have an automatic pilot. He hasn't got one. Simply, really, because he hasn't got much physical technique. So he hasn't got an automatic pilot. So he's thinking and creating all the time. So this is where sort of glib, facile technique can make you as a musician feel comfortable, but the audience get, oh God, he's just,
which actually takes us back to the comment earlier on about these very, very technical players because of the way they're educated, which is what we were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly,
actually,
exactly.
You know,
it's absolute what you might call a tension, really, between having it down, which makes you feel relaxed, and makes inclined to get the audience bored. I mean, I'm not going to mention names because some of these are great players, but there's some great players from the history of, let's say, jazz guitar, who, for me, you know, I'm going, oh wow, the refinement of the technique and the accuracy and yet anybody listening, and I've always got in mind the idea of a listener who's probably female, very musical, but doesn't have any kind of axe to grind about jazz or anything, just listening to it as music. And they listen to these people and they go, oh no, it's dull, you know, it just goes on, you know. And then there are lots of great players in my book, in the jazz guitar world, who for listeners, you know, this kind of listener, the awake, aware, musically aware listener are just like, well, okay. Is that good?
Exactly.
Is that good? But they say to me, you know, because I'm a guitarist, they listen to somebody like that, and I'm going, wow, that's incredible. And they go, oh, is that good, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, no, but that is, again, that is the other thing. I think is the, you know, we're talking about, we mentioned about Hendricks and Django. It's that sort of thing that you can't really put your finger on what it is that makes it's the magic in somebody's playing. And as you say, they're taking risks. Maybe.
Well, definitely taking risks. God, both those guys. I mean, Hendrix, it was nothing but risks. I mean, that's why there's so much substandard recordings of him, because it's risk taking the whole time. And, you know, so many of the time the amps would blow up.
Yeah.
Tuning would go miles out, or the sound wouldn't be any good because the resources he had were pretty limited. I mean, now, you know, even somebody like me, I mean, I've got a fair amount of gear, but you know, I can adapt my sound so that it's whatever's going on, I can sound kind of okay. But you know, in those days, he did have the wah-wah pedal and the fuzz face and the Univibe, but not many pedals. Most of it is getting the feedback things happening.
Yeah, I know.
You know, he's using, as does Jeff Beck, minimal material to get a lot of really outrageous effects. And another thing that anybody listening to this under the age of whatever will forget is that Jimi Hendrix's sounds on the guitar were the most advanced, weird sounds you could make on any instrument in the universe, because there was no synths, or very few synths. There was no electric keyboards, really. There was the Wurlitzer piano and the Rhodes a bit later. So there were no standard instruments on which you could get such a freaky sound. I mean, the BBC Radiophonic Workshop could probably do it with. Delia Derbyshire could do it with stuff. But those sounds that Hendrix gets were the farthest out sounds anybody in the world could get on a musical instrument. And so we still listen to them and go, oh, that sounds great. But you got to remember, it was completely, wow, you know. So you get a guitar, you get a huge Marshall stack, you put them together, and things start happening. And that's what was great about him. Things start happening, and he goes along with it. You know, feedback appears from nowhere, and instead of going, oh, it's feeding back, he sort of goes with it. You know, and of course the arm, the use of the tremolo on, which had completely gone out. You know, people like Clapton and things completely abhorred that, and it was like, you know, all that, and it's just, you know, it was, you know, it's really worth saying that it was. I forget, you know, all those sounds. It's like, you know, they were the most. The electric guitar was the most for that period was the most advanced instrument. Then of course keyboards caught up, and then keyboards.
Exactly.
Of course.
We'll leave the keyboards there.
Yeah, we'll leave the keyboards.
So
no, I love, you know, of course I love. Of course I
so sort of
Jan Hammer, when I first heard Spectrum, when I heard Quadrant 4, and I thought, it's a bloody guitar player. Oh no, who's this guy? Oh no, you know, it was like, oh no, not some of the great guitar players. And of course, it was Hammer doing guitar on the Moog.
Yeah.
And I mean, that album, he's playing on it, is still, for me, the greatest. It's one of the few times where synth solos really grab you.
Yeah.
And he's you know, it's his playing on that is stunning. His solo on Stratus, that's something else, man. There really is, you know. And but it's guitar basically.
Yeah,
and then of course Jeff Beck, who's
it was interesting. Obviously, Jeff Beck was influenced by Jan Hammer.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say.
I thought that was really fascinating.
Sounding like Jan Hammer.
Yeah,
Beck started. He did the bend sounded like pitch wheel bend.
Yeah, I know, it's brilliant.
He's got amazing kind of spongy ears, you know, and he started sounding like Jan Hammer.
No, it's fantastic. So obviously, as you said at the beginning, you haven't done an awful lot of playing, but you've got a couple of. You didn't mention anything about what they call the Zapanistas, is it, that you've got?
There were a lot of things that started in around. I remember it's kind of around my 50th birthday, what are we talking about here? 1998. In 1998, a kind of load of. I think I got to that age and I thought, look, I've got to kind of either pack this in, or I've got to start taking this, not music, not guitar playing, but I've got to taking the kind of world seriously, as it were. So Stephane died, and I thought, I really, really want to do something for him. I really do, you know. I know tributes are a bit cheesy and all that, but I thought I'm going to bite the bullet because he was so important to me.
Yeah.
So I thought I put together this band which I called Sweet Chorus, which had Chris Garrett, great violinist, and Dave Kelby, rhythm guitar, and the first bass player was Malcolm Crease. And I put that together, and there again, I sort of, I probably just because of the sort of absorption and the way the world's gone, we did try to play a little bit more like Django, but he still didn't really play like Django, and I resisted getting the right kind of guitar. That was a deliberate thing. I thought, I'm not going to get a Selma, and if I have the wrong guitar, I will sound different.
Yes.
Anyway, so and of course that went for the first 4 or 5 years. That went fantastically well. Everybody wanted it, and it was really, you know, there's a kind of English conservatism, I know, but it's a friend of mine said that music, Grappelli Reinhardt music, is jazz for people who don't like jazz, and people like it. They like it. You're playing stuff that people like, and as you get older, it really it kind of makes, you know, making people suffer for your art becomes less and less something you enjoy, you know. So I found that music actually, it's great for lead guitar because there's all those post Reinhardt virtuosi to try and sort of not emulate, but at least kind of like try and keep up with.
Yeah.
And because I played with Borelli Legren and people like that, just astounding, you know. And I must say, I must say, as a little aside, I never ever got to a point where I'm in any way conceited about my playing, because I've played with such incredible guitar players. I've been playing with John Williams for 20 years, you know, the greatest classical guitarist there's ever been. I can't possibly think, oh, I'm pretty good. I don't think I'm terrible, but I don't go, I'm really something. You know, I never feel like that because. And then I played, you know, alongside Borelli Legren, and it's just, you know, just people can do anything, you know. And I feel honoured that I actually play with them. You know, it's like me, sort of, you know, I'm not fraud, but you know, sort of smudging my way through and playing with these incredible people. Anyway, so we put the Sweet Chorus together, and Chris Gary is a wonderful violinist, and it was great. I mean, particularly for the first 4 or 5 years. I mean, we've sort of carried on, but it's been kind of quite, you know, low key, really, over the last quite a number of years. We do gigs when we're asked and everything, and I love doing that music if I don't do it too much.
Yeah.
And there was a problem when I was with Grappelli. One of the things that happened was, you know, we did lots and lots and lots of touring, and there's something about that. I have to say, it starts not quite hitting the spot for me after a time. I do think, actually, you know, much as I love Django, that whole area doesn't really hit the spot for me, like the jazz rock, if you like, you know.
Yeah.
But it's still, you know, I really do like doing it, and it's tremendously refreshing if I just do it occasionally because it's acoustic, it's organic. You know, I have to adapt my technique a little bit, and that's one of the reasons why I've wrote back on it, because really the guitar technique for that kind of playing is kind of different from what I do. So, you know, I'm quite happy not sounding like, you know, one of the proper minutiae. As I said before, I'm reasonably happy with that, but I do like playing electric guitar. I'm basically an electric guitarist. I mean, I grew up on the electric guitar. My first decent guitar was a Gibson SG Standard, which was, you know, a proper solid guitar. So that's what I grew up on. I never really had acoustic guitars. So I haven't really got, although I played tons of acoustic guitar in the last 30 years, I don't really feel myself as I'm an electric guitarist who likes to make a racket, you know, and fly about a bit. That's me.
That's great.
Actually, you know, I'm just thinking sort of, you know, time-wise. How long do you want to?
Well, this might end up as 2 episodes, so don't worry.
Oh, 2 episodes. Yeah, I mean, I need my dinner.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, in that case, just literally to wind up, you've got that, and you've got this Zappa thing somewhere along the line.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's mention that. That was an Arts Council. Oh God, I've lost my words. Now, that was sponsored by the Arts Council, and they asked me to do it. And I initially thought, I can't do that. And it was a hilarious story, actually. I thought, I can't do that. It was the same year, 1998. And then I phoned Steve Lodder, a wonderful keyboard player, and he said, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. And we picked a band. And the gig was, the offer came in January, good money. And the gig was in October. So we picked a band, and then about August, I thought, oh, we should start rehearsing this. Right. So I'll go down to Chapels and get some music. So I went down there, and they said, oh, there isn't any. The widow has prohibited the publishing of any of this music.
Oh, wow.
There is. And I went, what the hell are we going to do? Well, I'm going to put on a funny moustache and play a Zappa type 12 bar all night, you know. And so I spoke to Steve, and he said, well, don't worry. He said, you know, this was early days of the internet, and Steve's fantastic on the internet. He said, look, I'll find some stuff on the internet. He found some few transcriptions on the internet. He did a load of stuff himself. And we ended up with enough material and rehearsed the band. And there again, I thought it'll take ages, but of course, with kind of modern musicians, it doesn't take any time at all.
No.
They just eat that stuff up.
Yeah.
Ate it up. You know, so there we put on a show October 98, and it was great, and was really good. And of course, great for me, because the two things about, you know, that music is really fun to play. And Zappa never played any of the tricky bits. So you can play the tricky bits if you feel like it, but it's perfectly authentic not to play the tricky bits. So, for instance, there's a bit in which Dweezil plays. There's a bit in Peaches and Regalia, which every time we play, I think I really should get this off. It's a soprano line, and it doesn't fall under the guitar fingers at all. But I really should. I always think, I bloody well learn this, but I don't. And of course, it doesn't matter. I can sort of, stand there looking frank, as if I'm directing the band.
Yeah,
and then of course
it's some mind work.
Endless guitar solos, which is fantastic.
Brilliant stuff.
Because the feature of the music is that he does all this tricky music, then he goes off on a great long guitar solo.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So then we got offered a tour, and we did a long tour, and we made one of the gigs we put out as an album. And there again, that's one of those things that people ask for it. We do a gig. I usually fix this up 1 or 2 gigs a year at the Pizza Express or something. Yeah. And it continues, but we've added new material over the years, but it's pretty much, something to bring out occasionally. Whereas my main thing, really, I think is apart from, I do lots of stuff, but the soft machine is, I do love that. Yeah. And we got a live album out now at the moment, which is marvelous. And John Marshall and Roy Babington, 80 years old.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love it. Really do. But look, yes, if we could wind that up for
that's really good. Well, I'm in the same situation as you. I haven't eaten either. So
yes, I'm starving, and Mrs. will be saying, "Well, you've your dinner's in the oven."
as long as the dinner's not in the dog.
Yeah, your dinner's in the dog.
Anyway, thanks for that, John. And all the best for once we get out playing again. Hopefully, we'll and
tell me what you're going to do with it, and I'll look out for it. You can send it to me, or I'll look out.
Yeah, I'll let you know. Don't worry.
There's a guy. He's got enough. He's got loads of material, but he's actually writing a biog, which is rather flattering. A guy called Rob Palmer, and so if any of these things happen, I sort of.
Oh yeah, cool. That's good. Yeah.
He gets. Most of this stuff that we've talked about, I think he's got already, but there's always something he might pick up on and go, oh, that could be good for
yeah.
It's rather nice to see somebody writing a book about you. So it makes you feel validated.
It is. It's good.
What, me? Worth it, which of course I'm not, but it is nice.
I'll put all your stuff in the show notes, right, so people can know what you're up to.
Yeah.
Right, mate?
Yeah. Please do.
Good. That's cool.
Anyway, let me know what happens with it. And if you want to do a bit more, up to you, man.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Great. Good fun.
Cheers, mate. Thanks ever so much.
Okay. Bye.
Well, that was fun. John's always been somebody who's been sort of on the musical horizon. In fact, if I remember rightly, the very first Guitarist magazine I ever bought had him on the cover. So obviously, he is a sort of guitarist, definitely. Anyway, so thanks to John for his time. And he had a lot more interesting stories that I've heard him tell before, but unfortunately I couldn't quite prise them out of him. But that was really good, a fun chat. So for those of you who want to support the programme, visit Patreon. Just put Patreon/Vic Highland. And I'll catch up with you soon. And hopefully this is coming out obviously in 2021, first episode. So let's see what this one's going to bring us. See you again.